Good evening, everybody. This is Hell's Unicorn once again in the throes of insomnia and thus putting this video together in the dead of night or the early morning, whichever you prefer to call these wee hours after midnight. Anyway, enough of me trying to be dramatic and failing miserably. Let me give you just a quick rundown of why it is I waited so long to make a video on the post-election atmosphere that we're all experiencing at present. Well, I've been a little bit busy the past couple days, but truth be told, more than anything, I have been bathing in the savory and salty tears of people who have professed their undying hatred of me. Yes, a white man who doesn't screw other men. Let the world beware. There's a temptation for me to do what a lot of other people of my disposition have been doing on YouTube the past couple of days, namely laughing in the face of the people who have been trying to shame people like me into a state of utter self-hatred and self-flagellation for things that are obviously not within my control. But I'm going to be taking a somewhat different course tonight. Instead of being sarcastic and satirical, I'm going to be analytical. And I'm going to be doing this in a stream of consciousness fashion, so please forgive me for the rant-like character of this analytical excursion. Anyway, what basically happened during this election? Because most people that I've been seeing on the losing side of this argument have failed to grasp exactly what has happened, let alone what is the proper way to react to it. Because if they did understand what actually happened, they wouldn't be going out into the streets beating people to a pulp for either being the wrong color or having the wrong campaign literature on their persons, let alone stopping traffic and in the process pissing off people on their own team. So what did actually happen here? What happened was, in no uncertain terms, a complete political realignment. And this political realignment was predicated, please excuse the alliteration, on the continual mutation of what is best understood as being the progressive movement of America. In the past, liberalism in America took on more of a classical Labour Party of Britain model. It was primarily concerned with the rights of lower income blue collar workers, and it had various side pet issues, but in general it was a party based upon class. There is something about American culture, especially post-American Revolution, that eschews the concept of class. But when you get down to it, class is simply a label that is placed upon a inescapable reality, which is inequality of outcome. There have been a lot of people splitting hairs between the left of center and the hard left over the difference between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. I simply take a much more simplistic, but I think very correct view on the whole topic. I don't believe in equality. I don't think that it exists. I don't think that the term itself should be used to describe things that are different in innumerable ways, be it the two sexes, or people of different ethnicities and religious persuasions, let alone people that live in different countries and have no idea of the other's existence apart from maybe from a statistical standpoint. I tend to look through this through the lens of fairness. Now, for most people today, the words equality and fairness are interchangeable. They do not mean the same thing. Equality simply states that the same exists, and thus the opportunity or the outcome or whatever have you should be the same. Fairness doesn't deal with that. You look up the definition in the dictionary of the word fairness. It doesn't get into quantifiable comparison between existing objects. It instead deals with the idea that persons, here, very important emphasis here, persons are given what they need. This is not a question of outcome or even of opportunity, but a rather of sustenance. Now, most people that argue in favor of equality of opportunity agree with the general concept of fairness, but I think because they use muddled language on this, they leave themselves at a disadvantage when dealing with the so-called social justice warrior type who thinks that everybody should have the same outcome, irregardless of what they've done or what they are even capable of doing. Fairness takes into account that there are people of different faculties, different abilities, and therefore there will be consequentially different classes of people. We don't need to go all ape shit and say that the world is a horrible place simply because there are divergent classes in existence within our local communities, states, governments, and nations throughout the world. It is not a crime against humanity that we have people in an upper class, a middle class, and varying degrees of lower class. It is simply a fact of life. Fairness instead argues that there should be reciprocity between superiors, inferiors, and equals. That is correct. We do not live in a world where there are simply equals everywhere. There are people who are superior in various ways, and these people are not, so to speak, superior in all ways, and are, in some facts, inferior to others in other ways. Perhaps a prime example would be your average Fortune 500 company CEO, superior in economic wealth, superior in authority within the bounds of his particular trade, but nevertheless dependent upon other people for his bread, particularly if his business does not specialize in the making of bread. This is the mentality that people have gotten sucked into this country, this whole us and them attitude. Over here we have the bricklayers, and over here we have the pitch makers or the cement makers. And heaven forbid these people actually accept each other's divergent roles yet complementary outcomes and come together to build some fucking houses. Please excuse the crude language there. I'm a little annoyed at the situation. So, getting back to my initial point. The political left, specifically those that stuck with Hillary Clinton and did not switch sides and become part of the political alignment that I was speaking to earlier, have completely failed to realize that their continual demonization and self-contradictory practice of attacking, shaming, and just out-and-out hostility towards white working people backfired. And to be clear, when you look at the actual statistical data of Trump's base of support, he expanded support in all categories from his predecessor Romney, who was likewise demonized by the media, but was a bit less blatant in his populist approach to politics. In fact, Romney was not a populist. He was a ne'er-do-well who came into wealth because of who his family was, and maybe expanded it a bit, became fairly wealthy, but spent most of his life being the successor of a political dynasty that never really was ready for prime time. Take a look at his father's illustrious political career, and you'll get a bird's eye view into what I mean by that. Hispanics came out for Trump more than they did for Romney. Asians, yes, even black people and Native Americans and women all came out in support for Trump more than they did for Romney. So, in contrast, white support only increased by 1% overall with Trump, And that 1% was key in a couple of specific states, namely my home state of Pennsylvania and Michigan, and also Wisconsin and any other Rust Belt states which Trump managed to win handedly. So instead of blaming white people, my social justice warrior friends, maybe you should be blaming the minorities that you claim to care so much about, because more of them ended up voting for Trump, despite all of the horrible rhetoric that you claim that Trump engaged in. To be fair, I was not happy with Trump's nomination to the GOP. I would have preferred Scott Walker. I would have preferred Ben Carson, even though he got a little goofy on a couple of points. And I would have even preferred, heaven forbid I say it, somebody like the former governor of Texas, whose name is suddenly escaping me because I don't like him much at all. I would have preferred any of those three over Donald Trump. But my preferred candidate of all was Rand Paul, who was basically blacked out by the media completely. So you reap what you sow, you idiots. You basically paved the way for Donald Trump to get the nomination because you thought he was a joke, and now the joke is on you. That is the extent of what I'm going to say about the mainstream media. I don't care about them. They need to die off. But to all of you people, you average voters out there that are rage-quitting politics and either threatening to move away or out there breaking stuff in the streets like a bunch of retarded apes, you're the ones I'm a little bit more interested in because I actually have to live amongst you. There are consequences for taking the road that you took. Going out there screaming, "You're a white male! You have no say on anything whatsoever! Get the hell out of my face! Get the hell out of my country! This is a PC nation now!" That's how ridiculous you idiots sound, just for the record. You guys pride yourselves on your so-called skepticism and your logic, because most of your patriarchs and matriarchs were in the so-called Atheist Revolution that started in the late 2000s. You weren't all of it. Some of you guys kind of went in a different direction, but a lot of you were the forerunners to this nonsense that we're now seeing unfolding before our eyes. Tell me something. Do you actually subscribe to the notion that an action necessitates a equal and opposite reaction? Because if you apply that scientific concept to politics, you should not have been surprised by what happened. What happened here is a group of people that used to define the political left became so alienated from it that they had no choice but to go the other direction. That's what happened in the early 80s with Reagan, because you guys got so caught up on this environmentalism crap to the point that you created a replacement theology known as global warming, although at the time you called it global cooling, and now you've muddled the language a bit more and call it climate change, as if that's something that doesn't happen every nanosecond of every day. The climate is always changing. It's by its nature something that a system that is in flux. That's how you get changes in weather. You idiots can't even predict the weather accurately within a few days, and you're going to lecture me about how the world's going to end in 30 or 40 years because I drive a car that gets a little bit less than 30 miles to the gallon. Fuck you, eat shit. You don't know nothing. Apologies for the bad syntax there. These white blue-collar workers are part of the new majority. Admittedly, a slim majority. You can blame probably some of that on the various third-party spoilers, though I would actually argue that Gary Johnson and the Constitution Party person took more votes from Trump than they did from Hillary Clinton, despite Gary Johnson's best efforts to put himself out as some kind of progressive. And believe me, he was trying. That was one of the key catalysts in me deciding not to vote for him and to back Trump this time. You'll notice that states where there is not a strong concentration of lower class and middle class white workers who have been screwed royally by the Democratic Party over the past couple decades, admittedly also the neocons, because they've been just as guilty of the really bad trade policies that have led to this. They are now a part of the what we would call the new right, since the neocons are basically the old new right. And you don't find many of these people in places like Nevada, where everything is all about gambling, or in Colorado, where everything's all about sex changes and pot smoking. I don't have a problem with pot smoking. I do have a problem with doing it right before you go into the voting booth and thinking that the world's all going to be rainbows and yummy Skittles just because you're voting for somebody who legalizes pot, irregardless of anything else he supports. No, you saw it in places like Michigan, and you saw it in Wisconsin, you saw it in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and so on. And you even saw it in places where Trump narrowly lost, such as Minnesota, a state that Republicans have really had a hard time even coming close to winning in the better part of 40 years. So, you guys got two choices. I'm speaking specifically to the social justice warrior types here. You can go on crying and complaining about the white man. Believe me, as somebody who has a fair amount of Native American ancestry on my mother's side, I get the whole, me no trust white man. But, you guys are going to have to grow up at some point. Most of the Native Americans have already gotten over that stuff now, and they're trying to be more practical about things. Or the ones that want to secede from the country and get out of the treaties that they're in, they're actually thinking about building actual functional societies rather than just thinking that we can all join hands and contemplate daisies and the world will be all right again. You social justice warrior types want to impress me? Learn how to delouse your fucking closets. I bet half of you have never even attempted it. So, that's your one choice. You can continue blaming other people for your own failures, or two, you can start to get something in your head rather than all over it. What that would entail is some long overdue soul searching and rational self-criticism. You're capable of it. You have a functional human brain. Start using it. Maybe next time around you won't consider other people that share this country with you and produce some of the things that you happen to use as your enemy. Maybe you'll try talking to us on a more equitable footing, for lack of a better term. Maybe you'll learn to treat other people with fairness and get over this equality bullshit. I don't know. One thing's for sure, I'm going to be resting a little bit easier tonight knowing that come January, even if Aetna decides to completely cancel my insurance coverage, if Trump is true to his word and Obamacare comes to an end and I'm allowed to purchase insurance across state lines without fear of a tax penalty, I may actually be able to get reasonably affordable insurance because there will be actual competition again. And there may be a few other benefits as well, particularly when it comes to release of regulations. Now, these regulations don't touch me as much as they do other people in other various trades, but they are an annoyance. Who knows, maybe in a couple of years we can get rid of this fruitcake nut job wacko idiot of a governor that we've had foisted upon us because of that stupid Penn State scandal from years back. One can only hope. Until next time, with prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.